Recently, a client of mine had a huge breakthrough. She stopped crying every time she saw her son. It was a habit that she got into about 20 years before when her husband died, because her son reminded her of her husband and her loss. And this went on for 20 years. It was really embarrassing for her son. And it was embarrassing for her that she couldn't control her emotions, that every time she saw him, she would burst into tears. And she went to see therapists and analysts and psychologists and psychiatrists. And then, in less than 3 months, she stopped. And she has re-engaged in life, re-engaged in her future, and is really having a great time. Partner loss is one of the losses that can get us stuck, really stuck. If you've ever gone through the loss of a partner or any significant other, you know what I'm talking about. You wake up in the morning and you don't want to get out of bed. You come home to an empty house and you can't stand the idea of going in. You dread the weekends because there are no distractions, but you don't want to go out anywhere because you are exhausted and you cannot keep up that front of being okay. At work, you may be so disorganized and confused and have brain fog that you can't get anything done. Or you work like crazy and you're busy every moment and you come home late at night because you don't want to face being alone. You know it's been going on too long when you're really tired of this and you just want it to stop. You know it's been going on too long when your friends keep on asking you, "Oh, how are you doing? Are you feeling any better?" And you feel like shouting at them, but you don't, because you've already lost so many friends and you can't afford to lose any more. You know it's gone on too long when your life is on hold, when you no longer have a sense of a future, when you're not even sure why you're still here. It's time to do something. I know the territory. I've had significant losses. My first husband left me for another woman. I lost both my parents 6 months apart. I lost a brother and a close friend. After I lost my parents, I decided to make a documentary film series called Secrets of Life and Death, about death and loss and grief. That was kind of my way of healing my grief. In addition, I joined hospice and I led partner loss support groups, and I've been coaching people, women in particular, around loss and being stuck for the last 20 years. I want to share with you 2 important major components that impact your grief and your ability to deal with loss, and help you to understand how it works. So the 2 components are the body and the brain. You need to know that grief is not optional. It's not a matter of willpower. It's a biological response to the breaking of a significant bond. And it has an impact on your body. First, it totally disorganizes the brain for the first couple of months, because the brain can't even begin to conceive of the idea that this person that was interwoven into the fabric of your everyday life is not there anymore. You wake up in the morning, the sun is shining, you're thinking, oh, and then you remember there's nobody in bed next to you. Or you listen to a piece of music and you remember, oh, and then you remember that they're not there anymore. And so there's so many things in your daily life, everything in surrounding you that reminds you of the loss. And you just want to go back into the past, but you can't live there. So that's the brain disorganization. But in addition, our bodies experience loss as a threat to our survival. Now, this actually may be true, especially if you lose the major breadwinner in your family, or you used up a lot of your income taking care of them during their last few years or months of life. But beyond that, the body experiences the loss as a threat to survival because we are wired to bond. We are biologically wired to bond because as a species, the human species, we do better in community. So Mother Nature made sure that we bonded. And when that bond is broken, it triggers this survival response of fight, flee, or freeze. You may recognize some of this in your own patterns. For example, when you get mad at somebody in your family or some unsuspecting telemarketer calls you at the wrong time, or maybe you get mad at people in the medical institutions. I ran into that a lot because they didn't tell you the right things, or they didn't warn you, or they did warn you. They get a lot of it. They're kind of used to it. So that's fight. And then if you stay busy all the time, you working all the time, or you are watching TV all the time, or you take a lot of trips to get away so that you don't have to feel your emotions, that's what we call flee. Similar to that, but a little bit different, is the freeze response, which is, staying in bed all the time, not ever getting out, kind of walking around listless, taking a lot of antidepressants so that you don't have to feel and you're tamping down your feelings. So it's kind of like a combination of flee and freeze. There's another thing that happens when you have a broken bond, and that is that this really wonderful feel-good hormone called oxytocin takes a deep dive. Mother Nature uses oxytocin to get us to bond. It's powerful, it's addictive, it's fabulous. And when you lose a partner, your oxytocin takes a big dip because you're not getting the hugs, you're not getting the love anymore. So between the fight, flee, freeze, the disorganized mind, and the lack of oxytocin, grief feels pretty rotten. But in addition to that is another thing, which is that all loss is connected. And oftentimes when we're going through a significant loss, it brings up other losses from our past. And they show up kind of like little children that have been neglected, and now they see that their mother is paying attention and they just jump in there. And so oftentimes you're grieving more than one loss, or the particular response that you're having to the current loss is informed by earlier losses. So that's the body and a little bit the brain. But there's another way in which the brain connects in with this mechanism. And that is, it wants to help. The brain is wired to try and make sense of things. And so when the body feels bad, the brain wants to explain things. Unfortunately, oftentimes, the brain goes into this catastrophic thinking. I will never love again. I'm too old. I'm going to be like this for the rest of my life. There is no hope. I have no future. And the body says, oh no, because the body believes whatever the brain tells it. Because the body doesn't know the difference between what you're making up in your mind and what's actually out there. And part of the reason for that is we never connect with what's out there. We're always filtering it through our minds. We're always filtering it through what we experienced in our childhood, our beliefs, and our habits. So, of course, the body says, okay, so we're never going to be happy again. I feel terrible. Fight, flee, freeze. So those are the two things that work together. And it's really important for you to do something, at least after 3 months, because all this time, the mind is starting to make new neural patterns to make sense of this new reality. Because at first, remember, every time you see that that person is not there anymore, it kind of goes into shock. It's like you're traveling along these little neural pathways, and it comes to a big void, a big, huge black hole. But eventually, the mind constructs new network patterns to take the place of that black hole. If you don't do that with consciousness and awareness, there are some traps you can fall into. And one of those traps is to identify with the identity of the widow, the poor, hurt widow. And some people can do that for the rest of their lives. When I first started facilitating hospice partner loss support groups, the women, a number of the women who were there had been there for over 2 and 3 years. And they had enshrined their husbands. Their husbands were like gods, and they would revel in their misery. I invited them to change. They didn't really want to go back into the emotions that they needed to release in order to heal. So they were replaced with other people who were more willing and more motivated to move forward. So that's one pitfall, is that you can get habituated to the loss. But on the other side, there are people who, and this is sort of the flee approach, is they jump into new relationships right away before they've healed the loss. I actually did that after my husband left me. I actually had a guy sort of waiting in the wings because I started to see that this relationship wasn't going to survive. This was a 15-year relationship. Now that new relationship did not last, but it did keep me out of trouble. A friend of mine who went through a divorce, because she didn't heal the loss, she went through relationship after relationship after relationship because she was trying to rebond, but she hadn't done the emotional healing to learn from her previous relationship so that she could have a good new relationship. I had a client who came to me because she was having difficulties with her relationships with her children and grandchildren. And she was in her late 80s and concerned about healing that breach before she died. It turns out that after her husband died, like 60 years ago, she got involved with this man who didn't want her to have anything to do with her children. We had to go back and first heal the loss of her husband, to deal with the grief around the loss of her husband, and actually went back even further to heal losses and emotional wounds around her parents, which set her up to never heal the loss of her husband. And when she healed those relationships, she was actually able to heal her relationships with her daughters and her granddaughters. What you need to understand is that all losses are connected, and a lot of our response to our current loss is informed by early losses, early emotional wounds and trauma. Because when we're children, we have to survive, and it's a very, very vulnerable time. And our first relationships are with our parents, so they have a huge impact on the way in which we view the world. They have an effect on our beliefs, and they have an effect on our behavioral habits and how we handle relationships. And we learn from them how they handle loss. And if they've tamped their emotions down, that's what we're going to learn until we learn something different. So oftentimes when I'm working with a client, I need to take them back to earlier patterns for them to understand why they're reacting the way they are. Not for judgment, not for criticism, but actually for compassion, to understand that little inner child in all of us that has struggled so hard to survive, to get the love that that child needs to thrive. If you would like to know about your own loss and how you can move forward from being stuck to unstoppable, I invite you to have a conversation with me. A 30-minute introductory conversation to find out how you could change your situation and what you need to do and how I might be able to help you and whether we're a fit. All you need to do is go to talkwithdrmichelle.com. That's it's meet, M-E-E-T, with Dr. Dr. Michelle with 2 L's.com, and schedule an appointment with me and let's talk. Please come back again because I'm going to be taking a look at some of the other kinds of losses that can get us stuck and what to do about them. Bye for now.